Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I used to think all those online dating horror stories were just that, stories. Exaggerated tales people told for attention or to make themselves feel better about their own terrible dating lives. I mean, sure, I'd had my share of awkward encounters and ghostings, but nothing truly terrifying. Then I met him on Hinge. And let me tell you, the internet is a wild, wild place. It all started pretty innocently. I'd been on Hinge for a few months, swiping with a mix of hope and cynicism. I'd had a couple of decent dates, but nothing that really clicked. I was starting to think that maybe I was just destined to be single forever, surrounded by cats and takeout containers. Then I saw Daniel's profile. His pictures were intriguing. He had this brooding, intense look that I found oddly attractive. One picture showed him hiking in the mountains. Another showed him reading a book in a dimly lit cafe. He seemed intelligent, adventurous, and maybe a little bit damaged, which, let's be honest, is always appealing. His prompts were equally intriguing. He wrote about his love for obscure films, his passion for environmentalism, and his belief in the power of human connection. He even quoted a line from my favorite poet. I was hooked. We matched instantly, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't your typical, "Hey, how's your day going?" kind of guy. He asked me about my dreams, my fears, my deepest insecurities. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know the real me, not just the curated version I presented online. We talked for hours every day, and I quickly developed a serious crush. After a week of intense texting, we decided to meet up for drinks. He suggested this cozy little bar in my neighborhood, the kind of place that played jazz music and served craft cocktails. It sounded perfect. I spent hours getting ready, agonizing over what to wear, what to say. I wanted to make a good impression. When I arrived at the bar, Daniel was already there, waiting for me. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He was tall and lean, with piercing blue eyes and a charming smile. We hugged, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. This was it, I thought. This could be the one. The date started off great. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He was witty, intelligent, and incredibly engaging. He listened intently to everything I said, making me feel like the most important person in the world. I was completely smitten. But as the night wore on, things started to get a little weird. He started asking me increasingly personal questions, probing into my past relationships, my family dynamics, my deepest traumas. It felt like he was trying to dissect me, to understand every single aspect of my being. I tried to steer the conversation in a lighter direction, but he kept bringing it back to these intense, emotionally charged topics. Then he started talking about his own past. He told me about his difficult childhood, his struggles with depression, his failed relationships. He painted a picture of himself as a tortured soul, a victim of circumstance. I felt a wave of sympathy for him, but also a nagging sense of unease. He also kept talking about a past relationship, one that ended tragically. I asked what happened, and he got really sad and didn't want to talk about it. I dropped it and we moved on, but I felt like I should have asked more questions. As the night progressed, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He would swing between being incredibly charming and solicitous to dark and brooding. He started staring at me intensely, his eyes burning into mine. It was unnerving. I began to feel trapped, like I couldn't escape his gaze. It was so odd I felt like something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I was trying to make the date more chill, and he was doing the opposite, and it was making me more and more uncomfortable. Finally, I decided that I'd had enough. I told him that I had to go, that I had an early morning. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't try to stop me. He walked me to my car, and as I got in, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a passionate, intense kiss, but it also felt possessive. It left me feeling more disturbed than aroused. I drove home in a daze, trying to process everything that had just happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with Daniel, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I decided to trust my gut and cut things off. The next day, I sent him a text message, telling him that I wasn't feeling a connection and that I didn't want to see him again. He responded immediately with a barrage of messages. He begged me to reconsider, telling me that I was making a mistake, that we were meant to be together. His messages became increasingly frantic and desperate. I blocked his number, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Over the next few days, I started receiving strange phone calls, emails, and social media messages from anonymous accounts. The messages were cryptic and unsettling, hinting at things that only Daniel and I knew. It was clear that he was behind them. I started to feel like I was being watched. I would catch glimpses of someone following me, but when I turned around, they would disappear. I started to avoid going out alone, and I always made sure to lock my doors and windows. I was terrified. Then, one night, I came home to find my apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my belongings had been rearranged, almost like someone had been searching for something. I called the police, but they couldn't find any evidence of forced entry. They told me that it was probably just a random burglary, but I knew better. It was Daniel. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live in fear like this anymore. I decided to confront him. I tracked down his address and drove to his apartment. I was armed with pepper spray and a healthy dose of adrenaline. When he opened the door, he seemed genuinely surprised to see me. He invited me in, and I reluctantly accepted. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew I had made a mistake. The apartment was dark and cluttered, filled with strange objects and unsettling artwork. It felt like I had stepped into a horror movie. He started talking, his voice low and menacing. He confessed to everything: the anonymous messages, the stalking, the break-in. He told me that he was obsessed with me, that he couldn't live without me. He said that we were destined to be together, that I just didn't realize it yet. I tried to stay calm, to reason with him, but it was no use. He was completely lost in his own delusion. He started to advance towards me, his eyes wild and unhinged. I knew I was in serious danger. I reached into my purse and grabbed the pepper spray. I aimed it at his face and unleashed a stream of fiery liquid. He screamed in pain and stumbled backward, clutching his eyes. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I ran all the way to my car, jumped in, and sped away. I didn't stop until I reached the police station. I told them everything that had happened, and they finally took me seriously. They arrested Daniel later that night. He was charged with stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to several years in prison. I testified at his trial, and it was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. After the trial, I moved to a different city and started a new life. It took me a long time to recover from the trauma of what happened. I still have nightmares sometimes, but I'm slowly learning to trust again. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I do extensive background checks on anyone I'm interested in, and I always meet in public places for the first few dates. I've learned that you can never really know someone based on their online profile. People can be very good at hiding their true selves. I used to think these stories were made up until this. Now I know there are some really twisted people out there. Okay, so, I never thought I'd be the kind of person with a legit dating app horror story. I always figured those were exaggerated or just, bad dates that got blown out of proportion. But now mine's the real deal. It still messes with me sometimes, and it all started on Hinge. I was in my late 20s, single for a couple of years after a pretty rough breakup, and honestly, just bored. My friends were all settling down, and I was tired of being the third wheel. So, I made a Hinge profile, put up some decent pictures, wrote a witty bio, and dove in. Hinge was okay. A lot of the same faces you see on every app. Some promising conversations that fizzled out. The occasional awkward first date. Nothing too exciting, nothing too terrible. Then I matched with Ethan. His profile was pretty standard. Good looking, maybe a little too polished, like he spent a lot of time curating his image. He had a job in finance, liked hiking, and seemed into books and movies that I also enjoyed. Our initial conversations were easy, flowing, and we seemed to have a lot in common. He was quick to respond, asked thoughtful questions, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me. After a week or so of chatting, we decided to meet up for drinks. He picked a trendy bar downtown, the kind of place where the cocktails cost as much as a decent meal. He was even better looking in person, tall, well-dressed, with piercing blue eyes. The conversation was even better than it had been online. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely charming. I found myself laughing a lot, and I felt that little flutter of excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. The date went so well that we ended up going back to his place. I know. Probably not the smartest move on a first date, but I felt comfortable with him. We just talked for hours, listened to music, and eventually, we hooked up. The sex was intense, like almost overwhelming. He was incredibly attentive, very focused on my pleasure, and it was honestly the best sex I'd had in ages. I left early the next morning, feeling a little giddy and a little guilty, but mostly just happy. He texted me later that day, saying he had a great time and wanted to see me again. I agreed immediately. We went out again a few days later, and the pattern continued. Amazing conversations, incredible sex, and that growing sense that maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. But then, things started to get weird. It started small. He would ask me questions about my daily routine, seemingly innocent things, like what time I usually left for work, what route I took, who I saw during the day. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Just making conversation, right? But then the questions became more specific. What kind of security system did my apartment building have? Did I have a doorman? What floor did I live on? Did I usually leave my windows open? I started to feel a little uneasy. I tried to deflect some of the questions, but he was persistent. He'd frame them as just being curious about my life, wanting to know everything about me. And I, being naive and maybe a little infatuated, kept answering. He also started showing up in places I hadn't told him I'd be. One Saturday morning, I went to my favorite coffee shop, a place I only went on weekends. He was there, sitting at a table, waiting for me. He said he just had a feeling I'd be there, that we were somehow connected. I tried to play it off as a coincidence, but it freaked me out a little. Then there was the Hinge thing. I noticed that he was constantly checking my profile, not just liking my pictures or commenting on my prompts, but actually looking at my profile multiple times a day. I could see it in the app. It was like he was obsessively monitoring my activity. I confronted him about it one night. I told him I was feeling a little suffocated, that I needed some space. He apologized profusely, said he didn't realize he was being so intense, and promised to back off. He said he was just really into me and didn't want to mess things up. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the feeling of unease kept growing. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't shake this weird feeling that I was being watched. I lived alone, and I always kept my apartment locked up tight, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in the room with me. I got out of bed, grabbed a kitchen knife, and slowly walked through my apartment, checking every room. Nothing. Everything was as it should be. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I needed to relax. But as I was heading back to bed, I noticed something strange. My laptop, which I always kept closed on my desk, was open, and on the screen was my Hinge profile. I froze. I hadn't opened my laptop that night. I hadn't even been near it. Someone had been in my apartment, using my laptop, looking at my Hinge profile. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat on my couch, clutching the knife, terrified. The next morning, I changed all my passwords, installed a security system, and started looking for a new apartment. I also blocked Ethan on Hinge and on my phone. I didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to see him, didn't want anything to do with him. But he didn't give up that easily. He started calling me from different numbers, leaving voicemails begging me to talk to him. He started emailing me, sending long, rambling messages about how much he loved me and how we were meant to be together. He even started showing up outside my work, waiting for me to leave. I was terrified. I went to the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or physically harmed me. They told me to get a restraining order, but that required me to have contact with him to serve the papers, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I felt trapped. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what he might do. I started having panic attacks, and I couldn't sleep without taking medication. Then one night, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I fumbled for the light switch and flicked it on. Everything seemed normal at first, but then I saw it. On my bedroom wall, scrawled in red lipstick, were the words, "I'm always watching you." I screamed and ran out of the apartment, calling the police. They arrived quickly and searched the apartment, but they didn't find anyone. They dusted for fingerprints, but they didn't find any that matched Ethan. I spent the night at a friend's house, too terrified to go back to my apartment. The next day, I packed up everything I owned and moved out. I didn't even bother cleaning the place. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and got a new job. I cut off contact with almost everyone I knew, afraid that Ethan would find me through them. I basically started a new life. It's been several years since then, and I haven't seen or heard from Ethan, but I still think about him all the time. I still have nightmares about him breaking into my apartment and watching me sleep. I still feel that constant sense of unease, that feeling that I'm being watched. I haven't used a dating app since. I'm too afraid. I'm afraid of meeting someone like Ethan again. I'm afraid of letting someone get too close. I know it's probably not healthy, but I can't help it. That experience changed me. It made me realize that you can never really know someone, no matter how charming or intelligent they seem. It made me realize that there are people out there who are capable of anything. And it all started on Hinge, a dating app designed to help you find love. Ended up almost costing me my life. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the swipe right can lead to a nightmare you can never truly escape. Even now, years later, I still find myself checking windows and locks. A constant echo of that lipstick message burned into my memory. I'm always watching you. It's a chilling thought, and one that I suspect will stay with me forever. So I've been on Hinge for what feels like forever. I know. The app designed to be deleted. Blah, blah, blah. But honestly, it's slim pickings out there, and I'm not about to meet the love of my life organically while buying organic kale. So Hinge it is. And for the most part, it's been a wasteland of generic profiles, guys holding fish, and prompts that make me question the collective intelligence of humanity. But then I matched with Liam. Liam was different. Not in a he wears fedoras and quotes Nietzsche kind of different, but in a subtle, almost unsettling way. His profile was minimalist, just a few carefully chosen photos and prompts. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but he had this intense gaze that drew you in. His answers to the prompts were thoughtful, introspective, even a little dark. He wrote about his fascination with forgotten places, his love for old maps, and his belief that everyone has a hidden story worth uncovering. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Unlike most guys on the app, he didn't bombard me with compliments or try to steer the conversation towards sex. He just listened, asked questions, and shared his own thoughts and experiences. I was intrigued. After a week of nonstop messaging, we decided to meet up. He suggested a small, independent bookstore that stayed open late on weekends. It was the kind of place I loved, filled with the scent of old paper and the hushed whispers of readers. When I saw him waiting inside, I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. He looked even more intense in person. His eyes were a deep, piercing blue, and he had a way of looking at you that made you feel like he was seeing right through you. The date started off well. We browsed the shelves, talking about our favorite authors and books. He recommended a few obscure titles that I'd never heard of, and I was impressed by his knowledge and taste. We grabbed coffee at the bookstore's cafe and continued chatting for hours. He told me about his travels, his passion for history, and his research into local folklore. He was fascinating, engaging, and unlike anyone I'd ever met. But as the night wore on, things started to get weird. He began asking me questions about my past, not in a casual, getting-to-know-you kind of way, but in a probing, almost interrogative way. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my past relationships, even my dreams and fears. I tried to deflect some of his questions, but he was persistent, always steering the conversation back to me. He seemed particularly interested in my childhood home. He asked about its location, its layout, and whether I still had any contact with the people who live there now. I found myself becoming increasingly uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to first date jitters and tried to brush it off. But then he said something that really made my skin crawl. "You know," he said, leaning in close, "I feel like I've known you for a long time, like we're connected in some way." I forced a laugh and said, "Well, that's Hinge for you, right? Algorithm magic." But he didn't laugh. He just stared at me with those intense blue eyes and said, "No, it's more than that. I think we were meant to meet." I suddenly felt a strong urge to leave. I made some excuse about having to get up early the next day, and he didn't try to stop me. He just smiled a slow, unsettling smile and said, "I'll be in touch." The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Liam's words kept replaying in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had revealed too much about myself. I decided to do some digging. I started by Googling his name, but nothing came up. No social media profiles, no news articles, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. That's when I got really freaked out. I went back to Hinge and tried to find his profile, but it was gone. He had unmatched me. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I had given this guy my number, told him where I lived, and now he had vanished without a trace. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I kept looking over my shoulder, wondering if Liam was watching me. I started having trouble sleeping, haunted by nightmares of his intense gaze and unsettling smile. I told a few of my friends about what had happened, but they just dismissed it as a bad date. "He probably just got spooked," they said. "Some guys are weird like that." But I knew it was more than that. I knew that Liam was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. I started by driving past the bookstore where we had met, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, but he was nowhere to be seen. I went inside and asked the employees if they knew him, but they all said they had never seen him before. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I imagining things? Had I just gone on a really weird date with a normal guy? But then I remembered something he had said about his research into local folklore. I decided to visit the local library and see if I could find anything about him there. I spent hours poring over old books and articles, searching for any mention of Liam or anything related to his interests. And that's when I found it. In a dusty old book about local ghost stories, I found a reference to a man named Elias Thorne, who had lived in the area in the late 1800s. Thorne was described as a recluse who was obsessed with the history of the town and was rumored to have practiced dark magic. The description was vague, but something about it felt familiar. I kept digging, and eventually, I found a photograph of Elias Thorne. And that's when the scariest part was realizing that Liam was Elias. He looked exactly the same, except for the clothes. The same intense blue eyes, the same unsettling smile. It couldn't be a coincidence. I was staring at a photograph of a man who had lived over a century ago, and he was the same man I had gone on a date with. I didn't understand how it was possible, but I knew that I had stumbled upon something incredibly dangerous. I immediately went to the police and told them everything. I showed them the photograph, the Hinge messages, everything. But they didn't believe me. They said it was impossible, that I was probably just mistaken. They dismissed me as a crazy woman who had watched too many horror movies. I was on my own. I knew that Liam/Elias was out there, and I knew that he was dangerous. I didn't know what he wanted from me, but I knew that I had to protect myself. I decided to move. I packed my bags, said goodbye to my friends, and left town without telling anyone where I was going. I changed my number, deleted my social media profiles, and tried to erase any trace of my existence. I knew that he could find me if he really wanted to, but I hoped that by disappearing, I could at least buy myself some time. It's been a few years since then, and I still think about Liam/Elias every day. I still have nightmares about his intense gaze and unsettling smile. I don't know what he is or what he wants, but I know that he's out there, somewhere, waiting. And the scariest part is realizing that I swiped right. I invited him into my life, and now I can never truly be free. Hinge, the app that's designed to be deleted. Right, more like designed to give you a false sense of hope, followed by crippling disappointment and maybe, if you're really unlucky, a story you'll be recounting to your therapist for years to come. This is mine. I'd been on Hinge for a solid 6 months, wading through the usual suspects. Guys holding fish, guys flexing in the gym mirror, guys whose entire personality seemed to revolve around their love of craft beer and the office. I was starting to think I was allergic to the male population of my city when Mark showed up. His profile was refreshing. No fish, no flexing, no aggressively quirky attempts at humor. Just a normal-looking guy with a genuine smile, a picture of him hiking in the mountains, and a bio that actually said something about his interests beyond drinking IPAs and quoting Michael Scott. We matched, and the conversation flowed easily. He was a software engineer, liked indie movies, and, get this, actually asked me about my interests instead of just talking about himself. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. Just a casual, low-pressure first date. I wasn't expecting fireworks, but I was cautiously optimistic. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown on a Saturday morning. I got there a few minutes early, snagged a table, and waited. He texted to say he was running a bit late, which wasn't a big deal. I'm always late, so I'm pretty forgiving. But then 15 minutes turned into 30, and 30 turned into 45. I was about to cut my losses and head home when he finally showed up. He looked different than his pictures, not in a catfish way, but in a disheveled way. His hair was a mess, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had this nervous, darting look in his eyes. "Hey, sorry I'm late," he said, his voice a little breathy. Traffic was a nightmare. I forced a smile. "No worries. I just got here myself." We ordered our coffees, and the conversation started off okay. He asked about my job. I asked about his. We talked about the hiking picture on his profile. But then things started to get weird. He kept glancing around the coffee shop, like he was expecting someone to jump out from behind a plant. He fidgeted constantly, tapping his fingers on the table, bouncing his leg, and his eyes, they were just intense, like he was trying to see through me or something. Then he started asking questions that were a little too personal for a first date. "Do you live alone? Do you have any roommates? Do you have a lot of friends? Do you tell people where you're going when you go out?" I laughed nervously. "Wow, you're really getting right into it, aren't you?" He didn't laugh. He just stared at me, his eyes unblinking. "I'd just like to be informed," he said, his voice low. I started to feel a knot forming in my stomach. This guy was giving me the creeps. I decided to try to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "So, you said you're a software engineer? What kind of software do you work on?" He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Oh, just security stuff." "Security stuff? Like what kind of security?" "I can't really talk about it," he said, his eyes darting around again. "It's classified." Okay, now I was officially freaked out. Classified? What was this guy, a secret agent? I started making mental calculations about how quickly I could make it to the exit. "Well, that sounds interesting," I said, trying to sound casual. "Listen, I actually have to run. I have another appointment." He frowned. "But we just got here." "Yeah, well, things came up," I said, standing up. "It was nice meeting you, Mark." He stood up too, blocking my path. "Wait," he said, his voice a little too loud. "Don't go." I was just starting to enjoy myself. I took a step back. "Sorry, I really have to go." He reached out and grabbed my arm. Not hard, but enough to make me feel trapped. "Just one more minute," he said, his voice pleading. "Please." I yanked my arm away. "Let go of me," I said, my voice shaking. He looked surprised, like he didn't realize he was scaring me. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't mean to." I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and practically ran out of the coffee shop, not stopping until I was a block away. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend, Sarah. "Sarah, you won't believe what just happened," I said, my voice still shaky. "I just had the worst date of my life." I told her everything that had happened, from the weird questions to the classified job to the arm grabbing. Sarah was horrified. "That's insane," she said. "You need to block him immediately, and maybe report him to Hinge." I blocked Mark's number and reported him to Hinge, but I still felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside my window, made me jump. I kept imagining Mark lurking outside, watching me. I knew it was probably just my anxiety getting the best of me, but I couldn't help but feel scared. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I know, I probably shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist the urge to find out more about this guy. I started by Googling his name. Nothing came up. No social media profiles, no job listings, no anything. It was like he didn't exist, which, of course, only made me more suspicious. I then searched his phone number, and all I could find was a website that had a bunch of random numbers with comments saying they were spam calls. I felt like I was spiraling. How could someone have no online presence in this day and age? It was like he was actively trying to erase himself from the internet. After a long time of searching, I tried some reverse image, searching with the picture he used on his Hinge account. After about an hour, I found a local news article about a missing person. And there it was, Mark's picture. The missing person was last seen a week before my date. I immediately called the police to report him. They went to his listed address and found nothing. The place was completely empty, like someone had just packed their stuff and left in a hurry. They traced his bank accounts to find that they were opened just a few weeks prior and had nothing in them. It was like he just appeared. They investigated my claims, but told me there was not enough evidence. After that, I decided to delete Hinge and dating apps forever. This happened 6 months ago, and the person who went missing is still missing. To this day, I don't know who I met on that date. All I know is he went by the name Mark, and he used the image of a missing person on his profile. I don't know what he wanted from me or why he was using a fake identity. All I know is that it was the most terrifying experience of my life, and it's made me incredibly wary of online dating. Okay, so picture this. It's late summer. I am fresh off a brutal breakup, and my friends are practically shoving me headfirst into the dating app pool. I resisted for a while, swore off relationships, the whole shebang. But eventually, the loneliness creeps in, and the siren song of potential connections becomes too tempting to ignore. I caved and downloaded Hinge, because apparently, it's for people who actually want relationships, or whatever. My profile was pretty standard. A few decent photos, a witty bio, and some carefully curated prompts designed to showcase my personality without revealing too much of my fragile, post-breakup soul. I started swiping, cautiously optimistic. There were the usual duds. Guys holding fish, guys flexing in bathroom mirrors, guys who clearly hadn't read my profile. But then there was Liam. Liam had this disarming smile at his photos, the kind that crinkles his eyes and makes him look genuinely kind. His prompts were thoughtful and funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We matched, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: our favorite books, our travel dreams, our embarrassing childhood stories. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I was too caught up in the excitement of a potential connection to notice the warning signs. We messaged back and forth for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course, but also excited. I picked out a cute outfit, did my makeup, and tried to tamp down the butterflies fluttering in my stomach. When I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, my heart skipped a beat. He looked even better in person, tall, with messy brown hair, and those same kind eyes that had captivated me in his photos. The coffee date went amazing. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversations. It felt like we had known each other forever. He walked me back to my car, and we shared a sweet, lingering kiss. I drove home with a giddy smile on my face, convinced that I had finally found someone special. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. We went to a concert, had a picnic in the park, and even cooked dinner at my apartment. Each date felt better than the last. I was falling hard, and I didn't care. He was charming, intelligent, and genuinely interested in me. He listened when I talked, made me laugh, and made me feel like the most amazing woman in the world. He even met my friends, and they loved him. They said he was a breath of fresh air after my ex. Everything seemed too good to be true. And of course it was. The first red flag was subtle, almost unnoticeable. It was during one of our late-night phone calls. We were talking about our families, and he mentioned that he wasn't close to his. He said his parents were difficult, and that he preferred to keep his distance. I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone has family issues, right? But then he started getting weird about my family. He would ask probing questions about my parents, marriage, their finances, and their health. He seemed overly interested in my family's history, almost like he was trying to piece something together. I brushed it off as him just being curious, but it still felt a little strange. Then there were the disappearing acts. He would go MIA for days at a time, not responding to my texts or calls. When he finally resurfaced, he would offer some vague excuse about being busy or dealing with personal stuff. Again, I tried to be understanding. I knew he had a stressful job, and I didn't want to be clingy. But the disappearances became more frequent and lasted longer each time. I started to feel like I was constantly waiting for him to reappear. The real turning point came during a weekend getaway we had planned to a cozy cabin in the mountains. I was so excited for the trip. I had packed all my favorite sweaters, downloaded a bunch of movies, and even bought a bottle of fancy wine. But the weekend was a disaster from the start. He was distant and withdrawn, barely talking to me. He spent most of his time staring out the window, lost in thought. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he would just give me short, curt answers. On the second night, I woke up to find him standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. The cabin was small. He wouldn't let me be alone. When I asked him what he was doing, he startled and quickly turned around, saying he couldn't sleep. He seemed agitated and nervous. The air felt thick with tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I went to bed. He followed shortly after. I tried to cuddle up to him, but he flinched away. He went to sleep on the edge of the bed. I couldn't sleep. I was afraid of him. The next morning, I woke up to find him gone. He had left a note on the kitchen table. It simply said, "I can't do this. I am sorry." I was devastated. I packed my bags, drove back to the city, and spent the next few days crying and trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Had I done something to scare him off? Was I not good enough? Did he meet someone else? As I was in the house, he had planned to spend more time with me. I started looking for clues as to why he left. After some digging through his bags, I found his old laptop and tried to figure out the password. Eventually, after a few hours, I managed to reset it, and the first thing I saw was his search history. It was filled with information about my family. News articles, obituaries, social media profiles, everything. I started piecing together the puzzle. My grandfather had been a successful businessman who made a lot of enemies, turns out. He swindled a lot of people out of their money and land. I did some more digging. Liam's last name wasn't really Liam's last name. He had changed it recently, which I found strange when he mentioned it casually when we first met. He was the grandson of one of the people my grandfather had ruined. He had found me on Hinge and intentionally pursued a relationship with me, using it to try to get revenge on my family. He thought he was going to cause me pain by breaking my heart, but he had no idea about the years of heartbreak he was unleashing. I was shocked and disgusted. I couldn't believe that someone could be so manipulative and cruel. I immediately contacted the police and told them everything. They took my statement and launched an investigation. They were able to track him down and arrest him. It turns out that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been planning to do much more than just break my heart. He had been planning to ruin my life. It was a terrifying experience, and it took me a long time to recover. I learned a valuable lesson about online dating. You never really know who you're talking to. People can create fake profiles and pretend to be someone they're not. It's important to be cautious and trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. I still use Hinge occasionally, but I am much more careful about who I match with. I do a lot of research before meeting anyone in person, and I always let my friends know where I am going and who I am meeting. It's a scary world out there, and you have to protect yourself. I'll never forget what happened with Liam, and I hope my story can help other people avoid similar situations. I went back and read all of our messages, looking for signs that he was lying. I found a few inconsistencies and contradictions, things that I had overlooked at the time, but now seemed glaringly obvious. He had been so good at manipulating me, at playing the role of the perfect boyfriend. But beneath the surface, he was hiding a dark secret. I was so naive. I really wish I could erase that whole month, maybe even the entire year, from my memory. It all started innocently enough, with a simple download of the Hinge app. I was in a rut, working a dead-end job, and feeling like my social life had flatlined. Everyone told me dating apps were the way to go, a modern solution to an age-old problem. Hinge, with its designed-to-be-deleted tagline, seemed less about endless swiping and more about finding something real. Or so I thought. My profile was pretty standard. A few decent photos, a witty bio, the usual. I wasn't expecting much, but I figured it couldn't hurt to put myself out there. Matches trickled in, mostly guys who seemed nice, but weren't really my type. Then came Liam. His profile was different. He had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. His photos were all outdoorsy, hiking, camping, kayaking, activities I enjoy too. His prompts were thoughtful and a little quirky, hinting at a sensitive and adventurous soul. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked for hours every night, sharing stories, dreams, and anxieties. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, not just surface-level stuff. After a week of intense messaging, he asked me out. I was hesitant at first. I'd had my share of dating app disasters, and something about Liam felt almost too good to be true. But his persistence and genuine interest won me over. Our first date was at a small, cozy bookstore cafe. He arrived early, holding a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked himself. It was cheesy, I know, but it worked. We spent hours talking, laughing, and browsing the shelves. He even remembered that I mentioned liking a particular author and surprised me with a signed copy of one of their books. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We went on hikes, explored hidden parks, and cooked elaborate meals together. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: kind, adventurous, and deeply caring. He even got along great with my friends, who were initially skeptical, but quickly charmed by his easygoing personality. I started to fall hard. I ignored the little red flags that popped up, the occasional mood swings, the way he would sometimes disappear for hours without explanation, the vague answers he gave when I asked about his past. I was blinded by the intensity of our connection, convinced that I'd finally found the one. Then came the trip. Liam suggested a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the mountains. It sounded perfect, a chance to escape the city and reconnect with nature, just the two of us. I eagerly agreed, dismissing my friend's concerns about going away so soon with someone I barely knew. The drive up was beautiful, winding through forests and past shimmering lakes. The cabin was even more idyllic than I imagined, rustic, cozy, with a crackling fireplace and breathtaking views. We spent the first day hiking, exploring the surrounding wilderness, and enjoying each other's company. That night, after a hearty dinner and a few glasses of wine, things started to unravel. We were sitting by the fire, wrapped in blankets, when Liam suddenly turned serious. He started talking about his past, about a troubled childhood and a string of failed relationships. He became increasingly agitated, his voice rising and falling as he paced the room. Then he told me about them. He claimed he was being followed, watched by a group of people who wanted to control him, to ruin his life. He wouldn't say who they were or what they wanted, but he spoke about them with a chilling intensity, his eyes wide with paranoia. I tried to calm him down, to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. He became convinced that they were outside the cabin, watching us, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He started boarding up the windows, barricading the doors, his movements frantic and desperate. I was terrified. This wasn't the Liam I knew. This was someone else, someone consumed by fear and delusion. I tried to convince him to leave, to get help, but he refused. He said we had to stay put, to protect ourselves from them. We spent the rest of the night huddled together in the darkness, listening to every creak and groan of the cabin. He kept whispering about them, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and rage. I barely slept, my mind racing with worry and dread. The next morning, things only got worse. Liam refused to leave the cabin, convinced that they were waiting outside. He became increasingly agitated, pacing the room and muttering to himself. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't even look at me. I tried to reason with him, to snap him out of his delusion, but it was no use. He was lost in his own world, a world of paranoia and fear. I realized I was trapped, alone in the middle of nowhere with a man who was spiraling out of control. That afternoon, I made a decision. I knew I had to get out of there, for my own safety. While Liam was distracted, ranting about them, I quietly packed my bag and slipped out the back door. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car and begged the driver to take me to the nearest town. I told him what had happened, my voice shaking with fear and exhaustion. He listened patiently, offering words of comfort and reassurance. When we reached the town, I went straight to the police station and reported everything. They took my statement and promised to investigate. They sent officers to the cabin, but Liam was gone. The cabin was empty, save for the boarded-up windows and the lingering sense of unease. The police launched a search, but they never found him. He vanished without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a jumble of fragmented memories and a deep sense of trauma. I never used Hinge again. I deleted the app and swore off online dating altogether. The experience had shattered my trust in people, leaving me wary and guarded. I started therapy, trying to process what had happened, to make sense of the senseless. It's been years since that weekend in the mountains, but I still think about Liam sometimes. I wonder where he is, what he's doing, if he's ever gotten the help he needs. I replay the events in my head, searching for clues, for signs I might have missed. I know I'll never have all the answers. Some things are simply unknowable, destined to remain mysteries forever. But I've learned a valuable lesson, that appearances can be deceiving, and that even the most charming and seemingly genuine people can harbor dark secrets, and that online dating is a gamble with higher stakes than I am willing to play. It started like any other conversation on Hinge. Your travel photos are amazing. Where was that beach? Standard opener, harmless enough. His name was Daniel, and his profile was curated. Not overly styled, but definitely deliberate. He had a good smile, intelligent eyes, and a bio that mentioned his love for hiking and obscure documentaries. Basically, everything I look for in a potential match. I was cautiously optimistic. I'd been on Hinge for a while, enduring the usual parade of bland profiles and even blander conversations. So when Daniel actually engaged, asking insightful questions and sharing interesting anecdotes, I was hooked. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our biggest fears. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change. We both had similar aspirations, and it felt like we were on the same page, ready for something more than just casual dating. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small cafe in my neighborhood, which I appreciated. It showed he was paying attention to my profile, where I mentioned my love for local spots. The coffee date went perfectly. He was even more charming in person, and we spent hours talking, laughing, and discovering even more common interests. There was a definite spark, a connection that I hadn't felt in a long time. We ended the date with a hug and a promise to see each other again soon. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates. We went to museums, explored hidden parks, and cooked dinner at each other's apartments. He was thoughtful, attentive, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. He sent me sweet texts in the morning, surprised me with flowers, and always remembered the little details I told him about myself. I was falling hard, and I wasn't afraid to admit it. He started talking about the future, about trips we could take together and things we could do as a couple. He mentioned introducing me to his family and friends, and even joked about getting a dog together someday. It all felt so right, so natural. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me, someone who shared my values and dreams. Then, the little things started happening. Nothing major, but enough to make me pause. He would sometimes get distracted mid-conversation, his eyes glazing over as if he were lost in thought. He would occasionally forget details I had told him about myself, things I knew he wouldn't normally forget. And there were the silences, long stretches, where he would just stare into space, a blank expression on his face. At first, I brushed it off as stress or fatigue. Everyone has their off days, right? But the incidents became more frequent, more noticeable. One night, we were having dinner at my place when he suddenly stopped talking and stared at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. His eyes were wide, almost manic, and his breathing was shallow. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to touch his hand. He flinched away from my touch, as if he'd been burned. "Don't touch me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand." I was taken aback. "What don't I understand?" He shook his head, his eyes darting around the room as if he were searching for something. "It's not safe," he muttered. "They're watching." "Who's watching, Daniel? What are you talking about?" He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "I have to go," he said, his voice filled with panic. "I can't be here." He rushed out of my apartment, leaving me standing there in shock and confusion. I tried calling him the next day, but he didn't answer. I sent him texts, but he didn't respond. I was worried, but also starting to feel a sense of unease. Was he okay? Or was something else going on? After a few days of silence, I decided to go to his apartment. I had the address from when I drove him home one night after he had too much to drink. When I arrived, the building looked deserted. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and there was an eerie silence that hung in the air. I checked the address, making sure I had the right place. I did, but something felt wrong. I hesitantly approached the door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and dusty, as if no one had lived there in years. There was no furniture, no personal belongings, just empty rooms filled with cobwebs and shadows. It was nothing like the cozy, inviting apartment I had visited just a few weeks before. I walked through each room, my heart pounding in my chest. Where was Daniel? What was going on? In the bedroom, I found a small box hidden under the floorboards. I opened it, and inside, I found a stack of old photographs. They were pictures of Daniel, but he looked different. Younger, more innocent. And in each photo, he was with a different woman. Women who looked eerily similar to me. Women with the same hair color, the same eye shape, the same smile. A chill ran down my spine. I flipped through the photos, noticing something else. Each woman was crossed out with a red marker. A sense of dread washed over me. I had to get out of there. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the wall. Scrawled in what looked like blood were the words, "You're next." I screamed and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Who was Daniel? What was he doing? And why were those women crossed out in the photos? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. I decided to do some research. I started by searching Daniel's name online. Nothing. No social media profiles, no employment history, no anything. It was as if he didn't exist. Then, I remembered something he had told me about his family. He had mentioned that his parents lived in a small town a few hours away. I decided to drive there, hoping to find some answers. When I arrived in the town, I went to the local library and started searching the archives. I found a newspaper article about a series of disappearances that had occurred in the town several years ago. Young women, all with similar descriptions, had vanished without a trace. And the prime suspect in the case was a young man named David Miller. A cold shiver ran down my spine. David Miller. Daniel. Was it possible? I continued searching and found a more recent article about David Miller's release from a mental institution. He had been diagnosed with a severe personality disorder and had spent years in treatment. But now he was free. I drove to the address listed for David Miller's parents. The house was small and run down, with a neglected lawn and peeling paint. I hesitantly knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, her eyes filled with sadness. I introduced myself and asked if she knew Daniel. Her face paled. "Daniel," she whispered. "He hasn't gone by that name in years." I explained what had happened, showing her the photos I had found in the apartment. Her eyes filled with tears. "That's my son, David," she said. "He's sick. He's been hurting people for years. I tried to stop him, but I couldn't." She told me that David had always been a troubled child. He had a fascination with women who looked a certain way, and he would become obsessed with them, showering them with attention and affection. But when they inevitably rejected him, he would turn violent. She told me about the women who had disappeared, the women in the newspaper articles. She said that David had always denied any involvement, but she knew in her heart that he was responsible. "He's dangerous," she said. "You need to stay away from him. He'll hurt you." I thanked her for her honesty and left the house, my mind reeling. Everything was starting to make sense. Daniel was David, a disturbed and dangerous man who had been preying on women for years. He had found me on Hinge, drawn to my appearance, and had manipulated me into falling for him. And now I was in danger. I went to the police and told them everything. They took my statement and launched an investigation. They found David's apartment and the evidence I had described. But David was gone. He had disappeared without a trace. I lived in fear for months, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. I changed my name, moved to a new city, and deleted all my social media profiles. I tried to move on with my life, but the experience had left me scarred. I'll never trust anyone I meet online again. The image of those women with the red X's over their faces haunts my dreams. It started like any other conversation on Hinge, but it ended in a nightmare that I'll never forget. It taught me a harsh lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts. I'll never forget the feeling of dread when the notification popped up on my phone. "You have a new match on Hinge." Sounds ridiculous, right? Dread from a dating app? But this wasn't just any match. This was with him. Let me rewind a bit. I had been using Hinge for a few months, with the usual mix of mildly interesting conversations, disappointing first dates, and the occasional promising connection that fizzled out after a week. Standard dating app fare. I wasn't expecting to find the love of my life or anything, just hoping to meet some new people and maybe have a little fun. My profile was pretty straightforward. Pictures of me smiling mostly, a few travel snapshots, and a bio that attempted to be witty, but probably just came across as vaguely sarcastic. One day, I came across his profile. It was different. The pictures were all black and white, which I initially thought was a bit pretentious, but they were undeniably striking. He had this intense gaze, like he was staring right through the camera. His prompts were equally intriguing. One asked, "What's the most unconventional thing you find attractive?" Another said, "Tell me about a time you felt truly lost." It was all very brooding and artistic. I usually went for the guys with the generic, "I love tacos and dogs" profiles, but something about this guy, let's call him Adrian, piqued my curiosity. So I sent him a message. The conversation started out normal enough. We talked about books, movies, and our favorite coffee shops. He was intelligent and articulate, with a dry sense of humor that I found surprisingly charming. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change from the usual Hinge small talk. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for a drink. The date was weird. He was even more intense in person than he seemed online. He wore a long, black coat, even though it was a relatively warm evening. He kept making these prolonged eye contact with me, like he was trying to read my soul. And he had this habit of asking incredibly personal questions, like, "What's your biggest fear?" And "What's the darkest thing you've ever done?" I tried to deflect with humor, but he wouldn't let it go. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. I started to feel uncomfortable, like I was being interrogated rather than having a casual date. Despite my growing unease, I couldn't deny that there was something undeniably compelling about him. He was like a car crash. I knew I should look away, but I couldn't help but stare. Plus, part of me liked the attention. I'd always been drawn to the bad boy type, and Adrian definitely fit the bill. At the end of the date, he walked me back to my apartment. As we stood outside my door, he leaned in and kissed me. It was intense, passionate, and a little bit scary. I didn't know what to make of it. I spent the next few days trying to decide whether to see him again. On the one hand, I was genuinely intrigued by him, and I also couldn't deny that I was attracted to him. On the other hand, he gave me the creeps, and I started to think I should avoid him. I eventually decided that I couldn't ignore my gut feeling. There was something off about him, something that made me deeply uncomfortable. So, I sent him a polite message on Hinge, explaining that I didn't think we were a good match, and wishing him all the best. He didn't respond, which I took as a good sign. I tried to forget about him and move on. I went on a few more Hinge dates, none of which were particularly memorable. I started to wonder if I was just destined to be single forever. And then one day, I got that notification. "You have a new match on Hinge." My heart sank when I saw his picture. It was Adrian. How was this possible? I had unmatched him, blocked him even. There was no way he should be showing up on my feed again. I stared at my phone in disbelief, a cold wave of dread washing over me. He had created a new profile, using slightly different pictures and a different name, but it was him. I knew it in my bones. I immediately unmatched him and blocked the new profile, but the feeling of unease persisted. I started to feel like he was watching me. I would catch glimpses of someone who looked like him in crowds, or see a black car parked outside my apartment building for extended periods of time. I couldn't be sure it was him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lurking, waiting. I started to avoid going out alone at night, and I always made sure to lock my doors and windows. One evening, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a picture that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a photo of a coffee shop that I frequented, posted by an account with a private profile. The caption read, "Enjoying the view." In the reflection of the coffee shop window, I could see a figure sitting at a table, staring directly at the camera. It was Adrian. I zoomed in on the picture, my hands shaking. There was no doubt in my mind. He was stalking me. This wasn't just a creepy date gone wrong. This was something more. I decided I needed to take action. I contacted the police and reported Adrian for stalking. I showed them his Hinge profiles, the Instagram photo, and explained my growing fear for my safety. They took my report seriously, but said that there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of him directly threatening me. They advised me to get a restraining order. Getting a restraining order was a long and arduous process, but I managed to obtain one. It prohibited Adrian from contacting me or coming within a certain distance of my home and workplace. I hoped that it would be enough to deter him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wouldn't give up so easily. A few weeks after the restraining order was issued, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart leaped into my throat. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I flipped on the light switch and scanned the room. Everything seemed to be in place, but there was an unsettling feeling in the air, like someone had been there recently. I slowly made my way through the apartment, checking every room. When I got to my bedroom, I noticed something strange on my bed. It was a single black rose, lying in the center of the comforter. I approached the bed cautiously and picked up the rose. As I did, I noticed a small note tucked underneath it. I unfolded the note and read the words scrawled in dark ink. "I'm always watching." I dropped the note and stumbled back, my mind racing. He had been in my apartment. He had violated my space, my safety, my sense of security. The restraining order clearly wasn't working. I ran out of the apartment and called the police, hysterical. They arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search of the premises. They found no signs of forced entry, which meant that Adrian must have had a key. I had no idea how he could have gotten one. They took the rose and the note as evidence and promised to increase patrols in the area. I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I felt too vulnerable, too exposed. I packed a bag and went to stay with my best friend, Sarah. I spent the next few days in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every sound, terrified that Adrian would show up. Sarah tried to reassure me, but I could see the fear in her eyes too. One night, I was lying in bed at Sarah's apartment, unable to sleep. I kept replaying the events of the past few weeks in my mind, trying to figure out how Adrian had managed to infiltrate my life so completely. I knew that I had to do something to protect myself, but I didn't know what. Then an idea came to me. It was risky, even reckless, but it was the only thing I could think of. I decided to set a trap. I created a fake Hinge profile, using a picture of a random woman I found online. I made the profile as enticing as possible, hoping to lure Adrian in. It didn't take long for him to find me. He sent me a message almost immediately, using the same charming, yet unsettling, language that he had used with me. I played along, pretending to be interested in him. We chatted for a few days, and then I suggested that we meet up for a drink. I chose a public place, a crowded bar in the center of the city. I knew that it was dangerous to meet him, but I also knew that it was the only way to catch him. On the night of the meeting, I arrived at the bar early. I had already contacted the police and arranged for them to be nearby, waiting for my signal. I sat at a table near the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the crowd, looking for Adrian. I didn't have to wait long. He walked into the bar, wearing his signature black coat. He spotted me immediately and made his way over to my table. As he approached, I took a deep breath and prepared to face my stalker. This was the only shot. As he sat down and opened his mouth to speak, I gave the signal to the police. The police surrounded him, and they cuffed him and took him away. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and deleted all social media. To this day, I get scared. If he will somehow find me again. I should have known better than to fall for the most compatible algorithm. Hinge, with its promise of design to be deleted, seemed like the perfect escape from the swiping wasteland of other dating apps. I was tired of the endless parade of gym selfies and one-liner bios. I wanted something more. I wanted a real connection. And Liam, with his thoughtful prompts and love for obscure documentaries, seemed like he might be the guy. Our first date was at a quirky little bookstore cafe. He was even more charming in person, with a disarming smile and a genuine interest in what I had to say. We talked for hours, about everything from our favorite authors to our biggest fears. It felt easy, effortless, like we had known each other for years. He even laughed at my terrible jokes. It was the kind of date that made you believe in fate. Over the next few weeks, we became inseparable. We went hiking, explored hidden city parks, and cooked elaborate meals together. He was attentive, considerate, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. He remembered the smallest details, the type of tea I liked, the name of my childhood pet. He was the kind of boyfriend I had always dreamed of. But then, slowly, subtly, things started to shift. Little things at first, things I could easily dismiss as quirks or coincidences. He started showing up unexpectedly at my favorite coffee shop, saying he just had a feeling I'd be there. He knew details about my day that I hadn't explicitly told him, like the fact that I had a frustrating meeting with my boss, or that I had spilled coffee on my new dress. At first, I was flattered by his attentiveness. I thought it was sweet that he cared so much. Then, one evening, I mentioned a small antique shop I had stumbled upon during my lunch break. It was tucked away on a side street, the kind of place you only found by accident. The next day, Liam showed up at my apartment with a vintage necklace he said he had found at that very shop. He said he knew I would love it. It was beautiful, and I was touched by the gesture. But a tiny seed of unease began to sprout in my mind. How did he know I had been there? I started noticing other things too. He always seemed to know where I was, even when I hadn't told him my plans. He would text me at the exact moment I was leaving work, or call me just as I was about to start watching a movie. It was like he had some kind of sixth sense, an uncanny ability to anticipate my every move. One weekend, I decided to take a day trip to a nearby town with my friend Sarah. I hadn't told Liam about it, wanting a little time to myself. As we were browsing through a local market, I spotted Liam across the street. He was standing in front of a bookstore, staring directly at me. He didn't smile or wave. He just stood there, his expression unreadable. I quickly ducked into a shop, feeling a surge of panic. When I peeked out a few minutes later, he was gone. I told myself it was a coincidence, that he must have just been in the area. But the feeling of being watched intensified. I started noticing a strange car parked down the street from my apartment building. A dark sedan with tinted windows. I would see it parked there at different times of the day, always in the same spot. I tried to get a better look, but the driver was always hidden from view. I started confiding in Sarah about my growing unease. She listened patiently, but I could tell she thought I was being paranoid. "Maybe you're just overthinking things," she said. "Liam seems like such a great guy. Don't let your insecurities ruin a good thing." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that I was just being irrational, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't go away. One night, I decided to do some digging. I started by searching Liam's name online. I found a few social media profiles, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, I tried a reverse image search on one of his Hinge profile pictures. That's when I found it. The same picture, used on a completely different profile, with a different name, on a different dating site. The profile claimed the person was a 45-year-old man, living in another state. My blood ran cold. Liam wasn't who he said he was. But who was he really? And what did he want? I spent the next few hours scouring the internet, trying to find any information about him. I found a few old forum posts where people were discussing similar experiences, meeting someone on a dating app who seemed too good to be true, only to discover that they were being stalked or manipulated. I realized I was in danger. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed a bag with essentials, grabbed my laptop and phone, and crept out of my apartment. I didn't know where to go, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I called Sarah, my voice shaking, and told her everything. She was shocked and scared, but she immediately offered to let me stay at her place. As I was driving to Sarah's apartment, I noticed a car following me. It was the same dark sedan I had seen parked down the street from my building. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to lose it, weaving through traffic, but it stayed right behind me. I knew it was Liam. I called the police, desperately explaining the situation. They told me to drive to the nearest police station, and they would send a patrol car to intercept me. I floored it, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The sedan stayed on my tail, getting closer and closer. Just as I reached the police station, the sedan swerved in front of me, blocking my path. Liam jumped out of the car, his face contorted with rage. He started yelling, accusing me of betraying him, of ruining everything. I was terrified, but I stood my ground. I refused to let him see how scared I was. Suddenly, a police car pulled up, sirens blaring. Liam froze, his eyes widening in panic. The officers jumped out of the car and apprehended him. As they were handcuffing him, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a chilling mix of anger and desperation. "You can't hide from me," he said. "I'll always find you." Liam was arrested and charged with stalking, identity theft, and a host of other crimes. It turned out he had a long history of harassing women he met online. He had created multiple fake profiles, using stolen photos and fabricated stories to lure his victims. He would then stalk them, manipulate them, and try to control their lives. I spent the next few months working with the police, providing them with information about Liam and his methods. I also went to therapy to deal with the trauma of what had happened. It was a long and difficult process, but I was determined to heal and move on with my life. The experience changed me. I became more cautious, more guarded. I no longer trusted easily. I deleted all my dating apps and vowed never to use them again. I realized that the internet, while offering the possibility of connection, also harbored dangers I had never imagined. I thought I was being paranoid until I realized that my paranoia was the only thing that saved me. It was that nagging feeling, that persistent unease, that prompted me to investigate Liam and uncover his true identity. It was that instinct that told me to run, to protect myself, to get help. I'm still haunted by what happened. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his eyes, about his chilling words. But I refuse to let him control my life. I refuse to let fear dictate my choices. I'm taking things slow, focusing on my friends, my family, and my career. I'm learning to trust again, but this time, I'm trusting my gut. I'll never forget the lesson I learned from Hinge. The lesson that not everyone is who they seem to be online. The lesson that sometimes, the most charming and attentive people are the ones you should be most wary of. The lesson that your intuition is your most powerful weapon. And the lesson that you should always trust your gut. Looking back now, sprawled on my threadbare couch, the glow of my laptop illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, I can see the crimson flags waving frantically. Hindsight, as they say, is 20/20ths. But at the time, blinded by loneliness and a naive yearning for connection, I brushed them aside like pesky gnats. My descent into the Hinge horror story started innocently enough. After a particularly brutal breakup that left me feeling like a discarded sock puppet, my best friend, Sarah, convinced me to download Hinge. It's for relationships, not just hookups, she chirped, brandishing her phone like a holy relic. You need to put yourself out there. I reluctantly agreed. My profile was painfully generic, a few slightly blurry photos, a self-deprecating bio about my love for bad puns and even worse reality TV, and some carefully chosen prompts designed to showcase my quirky personality. I swiped with a mixture of hope and dread, bracing myself for the usual onslaught of awkward conversations and ghosting. And then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was intriguing. He was handsome, in a brooding, artistic sort of way. His photos were all black and white, capturing him in various pensive poses, staring out at the ocean, sketching in a notebook, gazing intensely into the camera. His prompts were equally enigmatic. The one thing I'm overly competitive about. Silence. Dating me is like a vintage record player, requires patience, but worth the effort. I geek out on the existential dread of late capitalism. Okay, a little pretentious, maybe, but definitely different. And I was drawn to different. Our initial conversations were surprisingly engaging. He wasn't into small talk. He wanted to discuss philosophy, art, the meaning of life. We talked about everything and nothing, late into the night, our words weaving together in a digital tapestry of shared interests and intellectual sparring. He seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings, listening attentively, or at least typing attentively, and offering insightful responses. He even remembered details from our previous conversations, a rare and appreciated quality in the vast wasteland of online dating. The first red flag should have been his reluctance to meet in person. He always had an excuse. He was too busy with work. He claimed to be a freelance photographer. He was feeling under the weather. He had a prior engagement. Weeks turned into months, and still, we only existed as pixels on a screen. Sarah warned me. "Catfish alert," she declared, rolling her eyes. "No one is that perfect online. He's probably a Nigerian prince trying to steal your identity." I defended him, of course. I insisted that he was just shy, or introverted, or genuinely busy. I wanted to believe in him, in the possibility of a real connection amidst the digital noise. Finally, after months of persistent prodding, he agreed to a date. He suggested a small, independent bookstore downtown, known for its late-night poetry readings. It sounded romantic, atmospheric, and perfectly Liam. The night of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, rereading our past conversations, and mentally rehearsing potential topics of conversation. I arrived at the bookstore early, my heart pounding in my chest. The store was dimly lit, filled with the comforting scent of old paper and brewing coffee. A small stage was set up in the corner, where a lone poet was reciting a melancholic verse about lost love. I scanned the crowd, searching for Liam's face, and then I saw him. He was sitting in a dimly lit corner, nursing a cup of coffee, his eyes fixed on the stage. He looked even more handsome in person, his features softened by the low light. I took a deep breath and walked towards him, a tentative smile on my face. "Liam," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his eyes widening slightly. He didn't smile. "You must be." "My name," he said, his voice a low, almost guttural rumble. It wasn't the voice I'd imagined. It wasn't the voice I'd grown accustomed to hearing in my head during our late-night chats. He stood up, and I realized he was much taller than I'd anticipated. He towered over me, his presence radiating an unsettling intensity. "It's nice to finally meet you," I stammered, extending my hand. He ignored my hand, his gaze fixed on my face. "You look different," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Different," I echoed, my smile faltering. "Different from your pictures," he clarified. "Your pictures were flattering." Ouch. Okay, I knew I wasn't a supermodel, but that was just rude. The second red flag, a blaring siren this time, should have sent me running for the hills. But I was already there, trapped in a bookstore with a guy who clearly wasn't thrilled to be meeting me. I tried to salvage the situation. I made a joke about the flattering nature of filters and angles, but he didn't laugh. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and assessing. "So," he said, after an awkward silence, "what do you want to talk about?" I suggested the poetry reading, hoping to find some common ground, but he dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Poetry is just sentimental drivel," he said, his voice laced with disdain. "I prefer something more intellectually stimulating." He then launched into a monologue about the futility of human existence, the corrupting influence of technology, and the impending collapse of society. It was intense, depressing, and completely devoid of any semblance of charm. I tried to interject, to steer the conversation towards something lighter, but he ignored me, steamrolling over my attempts with his relentless negativity. He spent the next hour lecturing me on various esoteric topics, peppering his speech with obscure references and condescending remarks. He made me feel small, insignificant, and incredibly stupid. I felt like I was back in college, trapped in a stuffy lecture hall with an arrogant professor who enjoyed humiliating his students. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my hand shaking. "I think I should go," I said, my voice barely audible. He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "As you wish," he said. I practically fled the bookstore, tears streaming down my face. I felt humiliated, rejected, and utterly foolish. I couldn't believe I had fallen for this guy, for his carefully curated online persona. I deleted Hinge the moment I got home, vowing to never subject myself to the horrors of online dating again. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I started receiving strange messages on my phone, texts from unknown numbers, containing cryptic phrases and unsettling images. Pictures of my apartment building, taken from across the street. Pictures of me walking to work. Pictures of me sleeping in my bed. I was being stalked. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. They told me to change my locks, vary my routine, and be vigilant. I was terrified. I spent weeks living in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every shadow, fearing every unknown number that flashed on my screen. And then, one day, I received a message that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me sitting on my couch, staring at my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face. The message read, "I see you." I knew it was him. Liam. He had somehow found me, tracked me down, and was now tormenting me from the shadows. I changed my number again, moved to a new apartment, and cut off contact with everyone I knew, except for Sarah. I lived in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, convinced that he was still out there, watching me. I never reported it to the police. I didn't have enough proof, and I didn't want to be seen as crazy. It's been several years since then, and I haven't heard from him again. But the memory of that Hinge horror story still haunts me. It serves as a chilling reminder of the dark side of online dating, the dangers of trusting strangers, and the importance of heeding those early warning signs, no matter how desperately you want to believe in something else. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. I should have listened to my gut, but I didn't. And now, I'm left with the lingering fear that he's still out there, somewhere watching. And I'll always wonder, will he strike again? I feel like he is a ghost in my closet ready to jump out at any moment. Okay, so I need to tell someone about this. I've been trying to forget it, bury it, pretend it didn't happen, but it keeps creeping back into my thoughts. It's a Hinge story, and it's probably the reason I haven't touched a dating app since. I still can't believe it actually happened, like I must have imagined it. I was fresh out of a really bad breakup, you know, the kind where you question everything about yourself. My friends kept telling me to get back out there, that I deserved to be happy. So reluctantly, I downloaded Hinge. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just maybe a distraction, someone to have a few laughs with. My profile was pretty basic. A couple of selfies, a picture with my dog, and some prompts about my favorite travel destinations and guilty pleasures. I swiped around for a while, matched with a few guys, but nothing really clicked. Then I came across Daniel. He was different. In a good way, I thought at the time. His profile was thoughtful and witty. He had pictures of him hiking, volunteering at an animal shelter, and playing the guitar. He seemed genuinely kind and interesting. His prompts were about the books he was reading, his passion for environmental conservation, and his love for obscure indie films. He even had the deal breaker prompt filled out with rudeness. Seemed like a safe bet. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about our shared love for hiking, our favorite authors, and our dreams for the future. He was a good listener, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated for a moment. I was still feeling a little vulnerable after my breakup, but Daniel seemed so genuine and harmless. I decided to take a chance. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near my apartment. The day of the date, I was actually excited. I picked out a cute outfit, did my hair, and put on some makeup. I wanted to make a good impression. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Daniel was already there, waiting at a table. He looked even better in person than in his pictures. He stood up to greet me, and we exchanged a warm hug. The first hour of the date was amazing. We laughed, we talked, we shared stories. He was charming, intelligent, and funny. I felt like I could be myself around him. He asked about my job, my family, and my hobbies. He listened attentively and responded with genuine interest. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this could be something special. But then things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began asking me questions that felt a little too personal, a little too soon. He asked about my past relationships, my deepest fears, and my biggest insecurities. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was probing, trying to dig deeper than he should. Then, he started making comments about my appearance that made me uncomfortable. He complimented my eyes, my smile, and my hair, but then he would add little remarks about how I could be even prettier if I lost a few pounds or wore different clothes. I started to feel self-conscious and uneasy. The conversation took a darker turn when he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. He described her as crazy and manipulative and said that she had ruined his life. He went on and on about how she had cheated on him, lied to him, and abused him emotionally. I tried to offer him some sympathy, but he seemed to be enjoying the drama, almost reveling in his victimhood. As the date progressed, Daniel became increasingly intense. He started talking about how he had been searching for the one his whole life and how he thought I might be her. He said that he felt a deep connection with me and that he knew we were meant to be together. I was starting to freak out. It had only been a few hours, and he was already talking about soulmates and destiny. I knew I had to get out of there. I made an excuse about having to meet a friend and said that I had to leave. Daniel seemed disappointed but reluctantly agreed to let me go. He walked me to my car and gave me a long, lingering hug. As he hugged me, he whispered in my ear, "I'll be seeing you again soon." I shivered and quickly got into my car. I drove home as fast as I could, feeling a mix of relief and unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just dodged a bullet. The next day, I received a text message from Daniel. He said that he had had a wonderful time on our date and that he couldn't wait to see me again. I ignored the message. A few hours later, I received another text message. This time, he asked me why I was ignoring him. I still didn't respond. The messages kept coming, one after another, each more insistent and desperate than the last. He started calling me, too, but I refused to answer. I blocked his number, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. He started creating new phone numbers and messaging me from those. He even started emailing me. His messages ranged from love letters to angry accusations. He said that I was breaking his heart, that I was leading him on, and that I was going to regret ignoring him. I was terrified. I felt like I was being stalked. I changed my email address, hoping that would stop him. But it didn't. He somehow found my new email address and started sending me messages there. He even started sending me letters in mail. He knew where I lived. The letters were filled with disturbing and threatening messages. He said that he was watching me, that he knew my routine, and that he would do anything to be with me. I was living in constant fear. I didn't know what to do. I considered going to the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that he was threatening me. It was all just words on paper and in text messages. I was afraid that they wouldn't take me seriously. I started taking extra precautions to protect myself. I installed security cameras in my apartment. I changed my locks, and I started carrying pepper spray. I avoided going out alone, and I always made sure to tell someone where I was going and when I would be back. One night, I was coming home from work when I noticed a figure standing across the street from my apartment building. It was Daniel. He was staring directly at me, with a blank expression on his face. I froze, paralyzed with fear. He started walking towards me, slowly and deliberately. I panicked and ran inside my apartment building, slamming the door behind me. I locked all the doors and windows and hid in my bedroom, shaking with terror. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, watching the security cameras, waiting for him to make a move. But he didn't. The next morning, I went to the police station and filed a report. I showed them the text messages, the emails, and the letters. I told them about Daniel and how he had been stalking me. They finally took me seriously. They assigned a detective to my case and started investigating Daniel. A few days later, the police arrested Daniel. They found evidence that he had been planning to harm me. He had been tracking my movements, researching my background, and even purchasing a weapon. I was relieved and grateful that he had been caught before he could do anything to me. Daniel was charged with stalking and harassment. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could finally move on with my life. But I was wrong. Even after he was in prison, Daniel continued to haunt me. He would send me letters from prison, professing his love and apologizing for his behavior. I ignored the letters, but they still managed to creep me out. I knew that he was still obsessed with me, even from behind bars. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and started a new life. I wanted to put as much distance between myself and Daniel as possible. I haven't heard from him since, but I still live in fear that he will one day be released from prison and come looking for me. This whole experience has changed me. I'm more cautious, more guarded, and less trusting of people. I'll never use a dating app again. I'm afraid of what I might find. I still can't believe it actually happened. Sometimes I wonder if it was all just a bad dream. But then I remember the text messages, the letters, and the look on Daniel's face, and I know that it was all real. It's a reminder that you never really know who is on the other end of the screen. You can think you're talking to someone sweet and kind, but behind that profile might be someone else entirely. And it's really scary. It makes you realize the importance of protecting yourself. Don't give out too much information. Meet in a very public place. Let your friends know where you are. I thought I was doing all of those things, but it's clear I wasn't careful enough. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, I might be someone else entirely. Or more likely, no one at all. This isn't some melodramatic opening to a cheesy thriller. It's a chilling reflection on a brief encounter spawned from the depths of Hinge. I was freshly single, and my friends, bless their well-meaning hearts, practically strong-armed me into downloading the app. Get back out there, they chirped. You deserve some fun. Fun, in my experience, rarely stemmed from meticulously curated profiles and manufactured conversation starters. Still, I begrudgingly swiped, mostly out of boredom and a desperate desire to prove them wrong. And then there he was, Liam. His profile was charmingly understated. No gym selfies, no boastful travel pics, just a couple of snapshots of him hiking with his dog, and a blurry image of him playing guitar at what looked like an open mic night. His prompts were witty, self-deprecating, and genuinely funny. He seemed normal, refreshingly so. We matched, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. We talked about books, music, our shared love of bad puns, and our mutual disdain for small talk. He was articulate, intelligent, and surprisingly insightful. He even managed to make me laugh, which, after my recent breakup, felt like a monumental achievement. After a week of almost constant messaging, he suggested we meet for coffee. I hesitated. Meeting strangers from the internet always felt like a gamble, a roll of the dice with potentially disastrous consequences. But Liam seemed different. He seemed safe. And if I'm being honest, the loneliness had started to creep in, a gnawing emptiness that even the best Netflix binge couldn't quite fill. So I agreed. We arranged to meet at a small cafe near my apartment on a Saturday afternoon. As the day approached, I started to feel a low-level hum of anxiety. Was I making a mistake? Was I being naive? My friends, sensing my apprehension, offered words of encouragement, reminding me that it was just coffee, just a casual meeting. But the nagging voice in the back of my head refused to be silenced. On the morning of the date, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, what to say, how to act. I was determined to make a good impression, to prove to myself that I was still capable of connecting with someone. As I was getting ready, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Looking forward to meeting you today." It read, "I have a surprise for you." A surprise? That struck me as odd. We barely knew each other. What kind of surprise could he possibly have? I brushed it off, attributing it to his quirky sense of humor. But the unease lingered. When I arrived at the cafe, Liam was already there, sitting at a table by the window. He looked even more attractive in person than he did in his photos. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and an easygoing demeanor that instantly put me at ease. We exchanged greetings, and I sat down, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. We ordered our coffees, and the conversation started to flow as easily as it had online. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family. I, in turn, asked about his. He told me he was a writer, working on a novel, and that he loved spending time outdoors with his dog. He seemed genuine, down to earth, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. As we were talking, I noticed something strange. Liam kept glancing around the cafe, as if he was looking for someone or something. He would pause mid-sentence, his eyes darting towards the door, then quickly return his attention to me. I chalked it up to nervousness, but it made me feel uneasy. After about an hour, he leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. "I have to tell you something," he said, his voice low and hushed. "I haven't been entirely honest with you." My heart skipped a beat. Here it comes, I thought. The catch. The hidden agenda. The reason why he was too good to be true. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'm not really a writer," he said, "and I don't have a dog." Okay, that was unexpected. I had been expecting something far more sinister. A secret marriage, a criminal record, a penchant for collecting taxidermied squirrels. "Okay," I said, trying to process this information. "So what do you do?" He leaned in closer, his eyes intense. "I'm a researcher," he whispered. "I study people." My unease intensified. "What kind of research?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Behavioral patterns," he said. "Social interactions. The way people respond to stimuli." "Stimuli," I repeated, my mind racing. "Like, what kind of stimuli?" He smiled, a chillingly unsettling smile. "All kinds," he said. "Positive, negative, subtle, overt." He paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver object. It was a clicker, the kind used to train dogs. He clicked it once, twice, 3 times. The sound was sharp and jarring, cutting through the gentle hum of the cafe. And then, he did something that made my blood run cold. He looked directly at me, his eyes devoid of any warmth or empathy, and said, "Now, tell me about your childhood traumas." I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. How did he know? How could he possibly know about the things I had buried so deep? The secrets I had never shared with anyone. He clicked the clicker again. "Tell me," he repeated, his voice like ice. "Tell me everything." I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but I was paralyzed, trapped in his gaze, unable to break free. And then, something unexpected happened. A waitress, a young woman with bright pink hair and multiple piercings, walked past our table, carrying a tray of coffees. As she passed, she subtly bumped into Liam's arm, causing him to spill his coffee all over himself. He yelped in surprise, his attention momentarily diverted. In that split second, I saw something flicker in the waitress's eyes. A look of warning, of urgency, of recognition. And in that moment, my instinct screamed. This was my chance. I didn't hesitate. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and bolted out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment, where I locked the door, drew the curtains, and collapsed onto my bed, shaking uncontrollably. I spent the rest of the day in a state of terrified paralysis, replaying the encounter in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. Who was Liam? What was he really doing? And how did he know about my past? The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything about Hinge, about Liam, about the clicker, about the waitress. They listened patiently, but I could tell they were skeptical. They ran a background check on Liam, but nothing came up. No criminal record, no history of mental illness, no connection to any known research organizations. He was a ghost. They advised me to be careful, to avoid contact with him, and to report anything suspicious. But they couldn't offer me any real protection. I knew I was on my own. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant fear, jumping at shadows, afraid to leave my apartment. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and even considered moving. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Liam was still out there, watching me, waiting for his chance. One day, I decided to go back to the cafe. I knew it was risky, but I needed to know more. I needed to find the waitress. I walked into the cafe, my heart pounding, and scanned the room. And there she was, wiping down a table. I took a deep breath and approached her. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you the waitress who was working here last Saturday?" She looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "Yes," she said. "Why?" I told her about Liam, about the clicker, about my fears. I told her everything. She listened intently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "I know him," she said. "He's done this before." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He targets women," she said. "He finds them online, gains their trust, and then he manipulates them. He preys on their vulnerabilities, their traumas, their insecurities." "But why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," she said. "Some kind of sick game, I guess." She paused, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small card. "Here," she said. "Take this. It's a number for a support group, for women who have been through similar experiences." I took the card, my hand shaking. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you so much." "Be careful," she said. "He's dangerous." I nodded and turned to leave. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a surge of anger, of defiance. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let him control my life. I was going to fight back. I never saw Liam again, but I know he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting women. And that's why I'm sharing my story. To warn others, to raise awareness, to help prevent someone else from becoming his next victim. If I hadn't trusted my instincts that day, if I hadn't recognized the warning in the waitress's eyes, I might be trapped in his web, lost and broken. But I escaped, and I'm determined to help others do the same. Trust your gut. Listen to your instincts.